Welcome to the Home Energy Score Assessor webinar. I'm excited by the number of attendees. Eric told me there'd be a bunch showing up. I wasn't sure I believed him, but there are a bunch of you showing up. Thank you. I do appreciate it. It's nice to see that the interest is there. Eric and I are going to be doing the presentation. I'm the technical lead for the program, so work mostly with the software. The more complicated questions that come through about why are you getting the score that you're getting, those kinds of things, those come to me. Eric's the one who keeps the trains running and makes sure you guys get what you need in order to provide the scores and get logged into the system and so on. So he's the one who keeps the trains running. I back him up when I need to. We're going to answer questions at the end. Ask your questions through the chat box, please. As we've already found out, I can't drive and talk at the same time, so we'll answer the questions at the end. The presentation is being recorded. We will post it online. Once it is posted, we'll send out an email for all the assessors and partners with the link. When we discuss the data collection and the data entry during this presentation, we're talking about the DOE Home Energy Score web interface. If you're using a third-party software to do the data entry, it may not look the same way. So if you're confused about how to enter the data, talk with your third-party provider or with your partner, and they will help you. The agenda. So we're going to start off. We're going to try to explain the score. We've gotten questions, just general kind of questions. Is why is it this way? Why are we getting this kind of answer instead of that kind of answer? Is house sufficient when I'm getting a low score? I'm going to try to explain that. People have asked, and how do I predict the score? Well, we'll discuss that. It's not something that's readily done. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what the score isn't. And then you'll get to hear Eric talk for a little while. He's going to talk about the data entry, the characteristics that have the largest impact on the score, the things we need to focus most closely on and get the data right, those things that don't matter quite so much. Data quality and consistency, making sure that we get the right values into the tool, we get the right score out at the end. We've recently added some new fields. Those of you who are using the DOE interface may have seen these. We'll discuss those and then also remind you of some resources that we provide so that you can get the things you need to do your jobs. Then it'll go back to me. I'll discuss recommendations, where do they come from, why do they come out the way they do, and hopefully answer some of those questions. And then when we get to the end, we'll answer any questions that come up in the chat boxes. So I'm going to try to explain the score. So the Department of Energy has created this nationally standardized miles per gallon score to try to simplify the energy efficiency simplify the energy efficiency message and enable valuing energy efficiency at point of sale. So, you know, as we all know, you can see the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances. You can't see how much insulation, can't readily see how much insulation's in the attic, or that the heating equipment or the cooling equipment is very efficient. This is a way of providing a simple way to see the energy efficiency of the house and to better value that. We know that people are looking for it. This is a way to show it to them. The score, some of you may be aware of the HERS, the Home Energy Rating System. That's based on comparison to a code home. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about the difference between the two. Home energy score is based on an absolute energy use range. So we define an energy use range for each of the weather stations in the country. There are about 1,000. And then we divide that up for the 1 to 10 scale. And so in San Diego, that range from 1 to 10 runs from 27 to 79. million BTUs. In Minneapolis, where it's, of course, much colder, the range is much wider, and it runs from about 74 to about 215 million BTUs. So the model calculates the energy uses based on the data that you folks enter, and comes up with that energy use for the heating, cooling, and hot water, and then applies that to the range to come up with the score. So if you have a house that uses 100 million BTUs in San Diego, well, that's on the wrong end of the scale for San Diego, and so the house will score a 1. But a house that uses 100 million BTUs in Minneapolis, well, that's pretty efficient, and it's going to score an 8. So we do account for the weather when we come up with these scores. When we calculate it, when the model works, it's accounting for the weather in each of these 1,000 weather station locations. In general, if all things are equal, a larger house will tend to score lower than a smaller house. If you've got 2 houses side by side, they both have the same level of insulation, they both have the same HVAC equipment, same efficiency. The bigger house is going to have more surface area. There's going to be more heat transfer across those surface areas. It will use more energy. It will be higher on the scale. It will score lower. It's just the nature of the beast, the way we've set this up on an absolute energy use scale. It's the way it works. Maybe contrary to what you might expect, the house age doesn't necessarily drive the score. A small, older house may score better than a large, newer house. And again, a lot of this has to do with all of these interacting characteristics coming up with the score. And if a house is significantly smaller but older and maybe not insulated quite as well as the large, newer house, it could well score higher. To push this a little bit further, to better align it with the idea of the miles per gallon rating, a Hummer is not a Prius, and you can't make it one unless you have PV. If you got a hybrid Hummer and you put a PV panel on the roof, maybe you make it a little bit better. But the Hummer is bigger, it's heavier, it requires a bigger engine to move it. It's just not as energy efficient. As shown here, it requires 14. It has an MPG of 14 miles per gallon. The Prius, on the other hand, 50 miles per gallon. We've got an 8-cylinder, 5.3 liter engine in the Hummer, much smaller one in the Prius. So similarly, a large house, it has higher energy use. It's got a bigger HVAC system. It's going to use more energy. Its miles per gallon is going to be lower. Now, of course, you might be able to make a hybrid Hummer and improve its mileage, but you're not going to be able to make it a Prius. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is when people are buying houses, they're looking at purchasing. If they're looking at Hummers, they're looking at Hummers. They're not comparing the miles per gallon on a Hummer with the miles per gallon on a Prius. So, a house that scores a 5, a large house that scores a 5 may well compare very well to its neighbors who are scoring 2s and 3s. And they're not comparing that to a smaller house that maybe scores an 8. We do not require the blower door test in the home energy score. We've done a good bit of analysis. We've done some study, and we've found that it's not required. Even if you miss on the wrong side, say the house has been air sealed, and you do a blower door test and indicate, and it shows it as being well sealed, but you were to go in the home energy score and say that no blower door test was done and that hasn't been air sealed, you're typically not going to be off by even a whole point. Again, we're trying to find a balance between the amount of effort required, the cost to do it, and the accuracy and the message to provide to the customer. So we've tried to balance these things. Of course, we will take the blower door number if you have it. If we don't, the things that matter are the location, the building height, the foundation type, the age of the house, where are the ducts. If they're inside, your infiltration rates are going to be lower than if they're in the attic or the crawl space. And then whether the house has been professionally air sealed. Most of you should be aware, but from what I understand, not everybody is. Solar PV was added to the home energy score in February of last year. In the home energy score interface, the DOE interface, these are the last set of inputs in the systems on the system space, the last page. Now, I've had people ask me, how do we predict the score? How can we go up to the house and predict the score? And the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult at best, and maybe even nearly impossible. I've found that I have a tough time with it as well, and I've worked with the tool as long as or longer than anybody else. But for example, if you get a two-story, 2,000 square foot house with a conditioned basement, it's going to have a lower energy use than a 2,000 square foot house with a one-story house over a vented crawl space. Even if all the insulation levels are the same and the HVAC equipment's the same, the second house has much more surface area exposed to outside temperatures. It's going to have higher energy use. Now, if you start changing the insulation levels, you add more to the attic, but not for the other. Well, and it's going to change those numbers. It'll make the second one use less energy. But how does that affect the score? Well, what are the surface areas? How big are each of those? And then if you want to change the HVAC systems or the efficiencies, that's going to affect how the house uses energy as well. So all of these things combined provide you with the score. So to be able to walk up to a house and predict what its energy use is going to be and thus what its score is going to be is very difficult at best, if not impossible. As I said, I'm not very good at it. I like to believe that I've been at this long enough that I should be able to. What isn't the score? This isn't an energy audit. It's not meant to be. And furthermore, there are several very good energy auditing softwares out in the world. And DOE is not looking to compete with those. The home energy score has its defined use. It's meant to be reasonably accurate, simple, quick, inexpensive snapshot of the house with an easy to understand score so that people can look at it, understand it, recognize whether it's doing well or doing poorly. We've done a lot of focus groups and things like that, but 1 to 10 scale people understand. We all know that a 10 is good and a 1 is bad, and intuitively, it's not something that has to be explained to us. And furthermore, we use the 1 to 10 scale instead of the 1 to 100 or something like that because of the what we call the granularity, the amount of data that we're collecting. We don't want to get any finer than the 1 to 10 score because it's more fine than we need to be, or that we're actually collecting data to confidently do that. The set of recommendations are based on the house characteristics provided by the assessor. They're not meant to be comprehensive, and we're going to talk a little more detail about that later. We're only addressing the assets of the house, so the heating, hot water, and cooling, and hot water use, so insulation and HVAC systems and so on. You guys know this. You've been doing data entry. You know what you're collecting. So that's what the recommendations are focused on, not things like occupant behavior. We're not going to talk about thermostat settings, Hot water use is based strictly on the number of bedrooms. We're standardizing things like that. Appliance and miscellaneous electric load uses are all based on things like house size, the number of bedrooms. These are not reflected in the score. It's only the home energy, the heating, cooling, and hot water use that's reflected in the score. So if you're looking at the home facts page on the score report that we provide, those numbers circled in blue are the ones that will be affected by things like the miscellaneous electric loads and the lighting and such. That score basis number is strictly the heating, cooling, and hot water. Okay, now I'm going to take a break and let Eric talk for a little while.
All right, thanks, Glenn. I just wanted to first say that thank you everybody for joining, and great thanks to everybody for participating in this program, in the Home Energy Score program. It is going well. We've scored over 95,000 houses, official scores at this point. We have over 30 active partners and over 600 assessors. So things are doing well, but our success depends on your success, and the success of the program also depends on you. So thank you very much. And everybody's doing a pretty good job as far as data entry goes. However, there's a couple things we did want to point out and emphasize, because every once in a while Glenn and I do find some aberrations, or some difficulties with some of the interpretations that people are entering. Characteristics most likely to affect the home energy score. The number one item is conditioned floor area. It is the most critical input. It carries more weight than any other individual input, and therefore it is most important to get this to do this calculation accurately. And as we try to remind people, please don't use listings, sale listings, Zillow, or websites to determine the conditioned floor area. It's one of those things you go out and you do have to measure it. We do prefer that method. It's the most accurate, and it's going to produce the most accurate score for the home, and that's in everybody's best interest. Wall insulation is probably one of the second most critical items, especially at low R values. If it's an older house and it has low R values, one thing to keep in mind is in a 2x4 stick frame house, your wall insulation R value, your input is almost always going to be R7. Wall insulation should be derated in the calculator. They install it in a 2x4 stick frame. You got a 3.5-inch cavity there. They install it as R11, but most of the time it's not a perfect install, which is the reason for the derate. And once you derate 3.5 inches of that fiberglass insulation, it drops down to R7. Occasionally you'll get a homeowner who has done a gut rehab or something like that, and you'll get these people that packed in R19 into their 2x4 stud cavities, and they'll want you to assess it that way, and it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. A 2x4 stud cavity is still 3.5 inches no matter which way you look at it, and bad insulation in there is always going to be R7, no matter how much you try to pack in there. Maybe it'll jump to an R9, but your selections in the home energy score are only R7 and R11 for that, so you're still going to choose R7. Duct location and characteristics is also important. Make sure you determine if the ducts are in unconditioned areas, and definitely determine if they're sealed and insulated. If you're not sure about whether they're sealed or not, then just say no, don't know. Ceiling height is pretty straightforward. There's only one data entry point in the home energy score for ceiling height, so you have to average throughout the house. This gets tricky when you have a vaulted ceiling or cathedral ceiling. It requires a little bit of basic geometry, but it's something that everybody can do, and you should be able to work that out without too much effort. And then, you know, if you have that one vaulted ceiling in the house, make sure you average that with the Assessor calculator with the other ceiling heights so that you get the overall average ceiling height. Foundation type, especially if there's no blower door input, foundation type, getting the type is very important, whether it's vented crawl space, unvented crawl space, conditioned basement, unconditioned basement, or of course slab on grade. It's pretty straightforward. Heating efficiency is critical also, especially in the heating climates in the northern parts of the country. Just as cooling efficiency, getting that accurately input is important in the southern climates. And we always strongly recommend that you enter the efficiency and not the year installed. The year installed is entering that is like giving the customer a dumbed down version of the score because it uses a basic default for the year installed. Use the Assessor calculator, use the energy guide on the equipment. Most HVAC equipment that's been installed in the last 10 to 15 years has an energy guide. Use that number on the energy guide, the AFUE or whatever type of system it is. Derate that in the calculator and enter that. It's only a couple of steps and it gives a much more accurate score. So, and then roof and floor areas need to be entered correctly because they can affect the score more drastically so if the insulation R values are low. Okay, Glenn, can you go to the next slide? There you go, thank you. The scoring tool does have minimum efficiencies based on the BPI standard 2400. So the scoring tool will kick out an error if you try to, for instance, rate AFUE combustion furnace for below 0.72. This brings up another point that a 72% AFUE you do not enter that into the score as 72%. It might be different if you're using a third-party web app or third-party software, but for the DOE Home Energy Score web interface, you enter it as 0.72, or if it's a high efficiency, it'd be 0.95, but you got to make sure you put that decimal point in there. It's not to be entered as a 95% furnace. It needs to be or 95% AFUE. It's 0.95 AFUE. And then you can see the minimums for the other units, other types of units. Going back to what I just said, if you were to enter 72 AFUE instead of 0.72, at least through the Home Energy Score DOE web interface, it'll kick out a strange error. And if you see that error when you click to go to summary, if you see an error page pop up, go back and check your inputs. And this is one of the things that you really want to check to make sure you've got that decimal point in front of your 0.72 or 0.95 AFUE. All right, we can move on, Glenn. So when you're entering surface areas, this can get a little complicated, but the roof and the ceiling area must be at least as large as the foundation area. Something to remember and something to keep track of. This item, entering these incorrectly, often will not produce an error in the Home Energy Score, but it will skew the actual score. So the roof and ceiling area of a home, if you take a one level home, say it's 1,000 square feet, the roof and ceiling area should be at least 1,000 square feet. If there's a vaulted ceiling or a cathedral ceiling in that house, it could be larger. It may be 1,025 square feet, something like that. But it can't be smaller than 1,000 square feet. So the roof, ceiling, and foundation areas cannot be smaller than the conditioned floor area divided by the number of conditioned floors. It should be by the number of conditioned stories. So again, it can be larger if the floors don't line up with each other, but it can't be smaller. The roof has to cover all of the foundation. It has to cover all the conditioned area. Again, for example, if you have a 1,000 square foot home on 2 levels, each level is 500 square feet. That roof area has to be at least 500 square feet. And the foundation has to be at least 500 square feet. So the new version of the tool that's coming out, I think it's coming out later this fall, will have data entry checks incorporated into it, which will flag certain items if they're entered incorrectly. But what this also means is that assessment runs that were submitted in the past, which had these errors, which still went through, if you were to submit those after these data entry checks have been incorporated, they will actually fail. Oh, and it says right there, so the upgrade will likely be implemented in August. And then if we see that certain assessors are having difficulty with this, we'll follow up with the partners to get in touch with them. And next slide.
I just want to make that a little bit clear. That last item, some of the partners have been provided this information, so they should follow up with some of the assessors who are having a little more difficulty making this work, because we want you to have it working smoothly by the time we put these controls in place, so you're not having to fight with the error messages.
So when entering crawl space insulation, it should be derated to fair or poor using the Assessor calculator. Crawl space insulation is almost never in good condition. Even when it's installed fairly recently, it still isn't always installed properly. And then one of the things to watch out for, tuck under garages. The picture on the left there, you can see the garages which are under conditioned area, under living space. They should be characterized as unvented crawl space. So in that case, it's almost always going to be that you're going to have to enter 2 different foundation types, because there's probably, in that house on the left, you'll see there's most likely conditioned basement area there as well. So you have conditioned basement area, but the garage area should be characterized as a unvented crawl space. And then you need to watch out for partial tuck under garages. It's going to get a little bit complicated. I won't go too deep into this, but you can see the home on the right, the picture on the right. Half the garage is not under any conditioned space at all. That means only half the garage would be considered as unvented crawl space. The other half of the garage won't be, you don't even have that, you don't consider that in the score at all. Like that other half of the square footage of that garage, since it's, as long as it's unconditioned, which most garages are, it's not appropriate to enter that roof space or the foundation space as part of your inputs for your house. So it does get a little tricky. It's something you need to watch out for. And next slide, please, Glenn. So another issue we're seeing quite a bit is the multiple systems in a home. And as you know, in the scoring tool, you can enter up to 2 heating and cooling systems. That can also get tricky. For instance, in this home, if the home is heated with a single boiler, so it's one heating system servicing 100% of the conditioned floor area, but has 2 different AC systems, a central AC serving 75% and a room or window AC servicing 25%, 2 systems must be entered, both including the boiler heat. So you would enter it as System 1, servicing 75% of the house, and that would be boiler heat and central AC. And again, please enter the the appropriate efficiencies for those, not the year installed, if you can avoid that. And then for system 2, you would enter 25%, services 25% of the conditioned floor area, and you'd still put in boiler heat again and room AC. And we know there's not two boiler heaters in there, but since the boiler heat services the whole house, you have to enter it a second time, and obviously enter the exact same efficiency for both of those heating units, even though essentially they're one unit. So in the example to the right, you can see that this is incorrect. It was entered as 75% of conditioned floor area as a gas boiler and central air conditioning. But if you look down at system 2, which covers 25%, the heating type says none. And that part, the cooling, is room air conditioner. But essentially, entered that way, you're saying 25% of the house has no heat. So that's an incorrect entry. So that's something to keep in mind. It's a little bit hard to get your head around, but even though it's one boiler, it needs to be entered for both systems in order to cover 100% of that conditioned floor area. And one more, Glenn. So new home performance with Energy Star fields were added in June. I think we sent out an email about this, and basically, unless your partner tells you specifically to use these, please just disregard them. When you have questions on how to handle certain situations, first check your data entry guidelines. If you're not sure where this is, go to the admin part of your home energy score. There is a link to the admin side of things, and look under resources under getting started packet, and you'll always find the most recent version of the data entry guidelines. It's a long document, but it's a good resource to have. It usually will answer most of your questions about these sort of items. If it doesn't, go ahead and email us at assessor@ee.doe.gov, and we use these emails to add. Also, if we get something we haven't already put into the data entry guidelines, an odd situation or a different situation that we don't have in there, we'll add guidance to that as well. So, all right, next slide.
Okay, it looks like it's back to me again.
I think it's back to you, Glenn. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. So recommendations. Eric, I think you need to mute. So the recommendations are based on, so all of the calculations in the home energy score are based on state average utility rates. We cannot, the rate structures for utilities are rather complicated. They're getting more complicated all the time. Trying to maintain those for every jurisdiction would be a nightmare, and we just don't have the staff to do it. So we use the state average utility rates as provided by the Energy Information Administration, probably more than you need to know, but that's where they come from. And the National Renewable Energy Lab has done a survey and come up with national average installation costs. So we're using those two average numbers, which means they aren't right for anybody, to try to provide these 10-year payback calculations. The numbers are coming, the recommendations are coming partially based on that information. Again, we are taking into account for the local weather. So those that are in harsher climates are going to have quicker payback. Than those in milder climates, but that's where those come from. And then, of course, there are local rebates that may also affect the paybacks, and we're not able to track those either. So there are a lot of things local to you that may affect the recommendations that we can't account for. We're trying to give a nice high-level report with high-level recommendations, but we wouldn't for a minute suggest that these are comprehensive or that they align with every program that's using the home energy score. It's one of the reasons why we provide the custom recommendations. We're going to discuss that in a minute. But one of the things we're considering providing to assessors is this little thing that we've put together. It's basically a back of the envelope sort of payback calculator, and it's only for installation. But basically, you would enter these things like the zip code in the area and the existing and upgraded R values, the heating, fuel, and efficiencies, and cooling, the same thing, and what your local fuel costs are, and your rebate costs are, or installation and rebate values are. And this would give you just, again, a back of the envelope sort of calculation for what's cost effective, what would work given your situation in the local area. I'm interested in whether you would find this helpful. So if you would, type yes into the chat box. If you don't think this would be useful, type no into the chat box. Custom recommendations. We do allow for the assessor to create their own set of recommendations. Right now it's a little kludgy in the home energy score side of things because you have to enter the house from scratch a full second time. But the idea here is that you enter the house as it is, and then you enter it a second time using the alternative EEM assessment type, and characterize the house the way you would like it to be for the upgrades. You go back to our dashboard here, and again, we're working in our own interface. Your third-party software may be different, but you go to the house as is, and click on the drop-down box next to standard, and choose which house is representative of the upgrade. The little box will go, the drop downs will go away, and you'll click on the icon, the little home energy score icon to the right of that, and that will provide you the score report showing the house as it is and the upgrades as you put them in. Now, the one thing it will not do is then include the recommendations. So when you get to the recommendations page, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's something along the lines of consult with your assessor for the recommendations appropriate for your home, something along those lines. So we can't track those changes, but we can give you the report that accounts for as is an improvement. We are going to make some changes to that, so it's not so kludgy and it'll be a lot easier to do, but I don't have a delivery time for that. I know it's not in the near distant future, so that didn't make any sense. Anyway, it's not coming up soon. There are a couple of things that the home energy score will not recommend on its own. So if you want to consider solar PV, or if you want to replace the HVAC with a mini split, those are things you'll have to do through this custom recommendation report. We also do not do any fuel switching. So if you want to assess whether it's worthwhile to go from a gas furnace or an oil furnace to electric, or an oil to a gas or something like that, then again you'd have to do that as a custom recommendation sort of thing. Wow, we got to the end already. That was quicker than I thought it would be. Okay, as a reminder, the presentation will be posted to our website. We'll send a link to all the assessors and partners once it's posted. We've got some recording at the beginning or some blank space at the beginning. I'm not sure which. We'll give you a place to start so you can scroll through that without having to listen to it. Any follow-up questions? We're going to answer questions in a minute, but any follow-up questions, come back to assessor@ee.doe.gov. That's true with any questions you might have. Those should always come there. Eric's very good at watching that and providing answers quickly. Now we'll try to, thanks for all the responses about the calculator. I do appreciate that. We're still assessing how we might best use that. So we'll keep you up to date on what's going on with that. Now to try to address a few of the questions. There were a couple of questions about measuring the house, whether you should do it inside or outside. The home energy score is not such a precise tool that you have to do it one way or the other. The width of the walls, unless they're beyond normal, aren't going to affect the square footage enough that it matters whether you do it inside or outside. As far as breaking the garage into without a separating partition, all we're doing there is this is in reference to the house on the right that Eric looked at. We're just characterizing the separation between the unconditioned and the conditioned space of the floor above. That's all we're trying to do there. So the partition is not necessary. Eric, you're welcome to jump in whenever you want.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, it's a little tricky to get your head around that one, but it's a matter of you're looking at foundation and what's underneath conditioned space. And if part of that garage is not underneath any conditioned space, then it shouldn't even be considered at all. But the part that's under conditioned space needs to be characterized as some type of foundation. And in this case, it would be unvented crawl space is the choice for a unconditioned garage space under a conditioned area.
A couple of general questions about using the tool. Our initial partners were general utilities, primarily because they already had programs set up and it was easy to attach this. As we've expanded, we've got states, we've got cities. We're trying to include or get home inspectors on board. They're in millions of houses a year. Certainly time of sale is a good time to bring us up. There's evidence that providing this information will, even if it's not necessarily good, just the fact that it's out there will speed the sale of the house. It'll sell faster, and it's not unusual for it to sell for more as well as compared to the house that doesn't have that. So it's valuable in that respect. And some of our utility clients have found too that because of the simplicity of the report, the fact that they can see in a more concrete, in this 1 to 10 scale, that how far they're going to move up, that it's easier to make the improvements, the upgrades sale, than if you're just talking in sort of general terms. So I don't know if those fully answer your questions, but hopefully they help. As far as the calculator sowing confusion with the customer, use it as you see fit. If it's not worthwhile, then I sure as heck would not suggest you use it. Statewide partners in Oregon, contact Roger Kainu with the Oregon Department of Energy. There's a couple of questions about what happens when the house gets more complicated. Okay, so again, part of the trade-off of the home energy score is a balance between accuracy and the level of effort required to provide the score. When the house gets beyond 2 foundations or 2 roofs or 2 HVACs, do your best to average things out. So if you've got similar foundation types, but the insulation levels are different, then do a UA calculation. Use the Assessor calculator. The first page of that gives you a UA calculator. You can use percentages instead of the actual square footages and the place where it calls for the areas. Make it a little bit easier. And then enter the data that way. The same thing with the HVAC. Combine those systems that have the similar fuel types and average the AFUEs. Should a solar tube be considered? Sure. Consider a solar tube as a skylight. So the garage is partly under. Go ahead, Eric.
I can't see the questions, Glenn, so I don't know what it is.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you're good. So if we have a garage that's partially under conditioned space, so let's say that the garage is 1,000 square feet and the space above is 500 square feet, then you're going to characterize a second floor with 500 square feet of unvented crawl space. You don't care that the full size of the garage is 1,000 square feet. It's only the interface between the garage and the space above. As far as materials available to market the score, go back to that resources page on the home energy score login page. There are all sorts of templates that you can use for marketing. North, there's not a chance in heck I'm going to answer that question for you.
We're a few minutes past 4, Glenn, so I don't know if you want to continue. Okay. I don't know how many.
We'll continue to answer the questions as long as I can get them. Certainly, thank you all for participating. The attendance was outstanding. We're likely to do this again. It will be recorded. We will put it on the website. We will let you know where that is. So if you want to listen to me some more, you can.
And on the next webinar, we'll basically do a consensus of what kinds of questions people are asking, what difficulties they're having, and try to focus on some of those problem areas where they're having problems assessing certain situations. I guess I brought up one here with the partial tuck under garage, but in a next webinar we could go over that in a little bit more detail if that be the case. But we're hoping to hit 100,000 official scores in October. So and again, thanks to you all, and thanks for joining the webinar. And Glenn, continue answering questions. But the rest of you, feel free if you need to go somewhere or drop off or hit another meeting, go for it.
Okay, I've got a question here. Do you distinguish between ducts and uninsulated basements versus ducts and unfinished attics? Yes, please.
You still there, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm still here. I read slowly. No, we don't. some of our partners are tracking upgrades better than others. Most of them are not tracking it closely, and we don't have good information on that.
I'm not sure everybody can see, Glenn, I'm not sure everybody can see the questions.
No, they can't.
So you might want to read them out before as you're answering them.
You're gonna make it hard on me.
Okay.
That question was the point of the program is to convince homeowners to perform energy upgrades, and it is indeed the point of the program. We are not tracking the improvements as well as we'd like. Some are doing better than others. We've done about 95,000 houses since 2012. Our numbers have gone up every year, so we're at least trending the right way. I don't understand the question about True Vault. We're trying to figure out how to deal with the duct leakage if you're actually doing a duct leakage test. There's a possibility that we'll be able to handle that in the future. We're looking at changing the actual calculator, the home energy score modeling system, at which point we may be able to handle that, but that's a good ways out. So don't hold your breath. As far as the error messages go, we're trying to make those better. Certainly if you're using a home energy score interface, I think they're a little clearer than some of the third-party feedback. We're working to make those better coming back from us, but some of it too is how does the third-party software handle them. If you've got something that you can't make heads or tails of, send to us. Preferably CC your software provider as well, because it's possible that it's a fault on their end, and they may be, if you send it to both of us, then you're more likely to get a quick answer. On-demand water heaters, they're coming. It shouldn't be too much longer. The question here is if you've got more than two foundations and they all have similar sizes and maybe they're different types, which two do you choose? It's not a simple answer. Use your best judgment. Try to combine things where you can. An unvented crawl space and an unconditioned basement go together. Slabs kind of hang out there by themselves. An unconditioned basement and I said that already. Conditioned basements, you might be able to put that with an unvented crawl if you really got to the point where you got three big ones and one of those is a slab. But ultimately you're going to have to sort of use your best judgment. As far as knowing what's in the wall, as far as the wall insulation goes, it is tough. We're kind of counting on the assessors to have some knowledge of building codes at the time the house was built. It's not foolproof, but it's about the best we can do right now. We've got some resources that I'm working with that we might be able to provide you a little better guidance in the not too distant future. But I'm not going to commit to anything right at the moment. Solar attic fans will not have an impact on the score. Okay, well, that's the last of the questions. At least I think I got most of them. If I missed your question, I apologize. Please send it to assessor@ee.doe.gov. And we'll get back to you on that. Again, thank you all for joining. The participation was fantastic. And Eric, I'll let you close it out.
All right, I didn't expect that, and it takes about 10 seconds for this thing to unmute. Yeah, same as Glenn said, thank you very much for joining. We look forward to seeing you or hearing you at the next one. If we have one, I think Glenn said it looks like with the kind of participation we had with this one, we'll most definitely set up another one in several months from now. And in that one, at that point we'll have the newer version of the tool out there with some upgrades, as Glenn mentioned, and we're looking forward to it. So we hope you are too. Thanks very much.